Hi, and welcome to this week's sermon. This week, Parshas Naso, I'd like to discuss an interesting issue that comes up in this week's Parsha. We read two different Parshas. We read two different parts of the Torah. The first one deals with the Sota, the woman who's been unfaithful to her husband, has been warned on numerous occasions, and there's a process that she must go through that checks whether or not she's been unfaithful to her husband, and certain punishments would happen if she had been. And right after that, the Torah tells us about someone else. There's someone called a Nazir. And a Nazir was a person that took upon himself not to have a haircut, not to come in contact with any corpses, human corpses, and lastly, he would not drink any wine. And the Torah finds it interesting, Rashi finds it interesting, that there's a juxtaposition of these two different parshas. Why are they written next to each other? And Rashi tells us right at the beginning of this parsha that you should know, Kol haroeh sota b'kilkula yazir atzma min hayayin. Anybody who sees a sota, a wayward woman, and what happens to her will keep himself away from wine. Now, the sign's very interesting. Why should somebody have to keep themselves away from wine just because they saw this? It's got nothing to do with me. I've never done this. I never plan on doing this. Why should I make any changes to myself? And one of the interesting answers that I heard is the following. It says, as you see things and as you experience things, they become more normal. And suddenly they become almost standard. So if you think about certain modern ways of dress. I remember the first time when I was about 17 or 18, I had seen shoes. The shoes used to have very thin endings. They used to come to a point. And then they changed the style and suddenly there was a very flat front. And the first time I saw somebody walking around with those shoes, I thought he looks like a clown. I mean, those are ridiculous looking shoes, especially for Shabbos. Who would wear shoes like that? Slowly but surely, as more and more people started wearing those shoes, it became more normal. And then, lo and behold, 6 months later, I went out and I also bought myself a pair of those shoes. Even though I had thought just a month earlier or 6 months earlier that they looked ridiculous, they became normal. They became what everybody else wore. And so it became something that I did as well. And everything that we see and everything that we go through becomes normalized because the more often we see it, the more we can live with it. The more often we experience it, the more it becomes part of the way we experience life and how we see things. And so therefore, this person might never have come into contact with someone that had done such an avera. Now he has seen someone that did this avera. Now he's seen a woman who's been unfaithful to her husband. And he says, oh, gee, I thought she was much nicer than that. I thought she was different. Oh, well, maybe it doesn't take somebody totally terrible to do something like that. Maybe it became a bit more normalized in his mind that such a thing could happen. And therefore the Torah says, do something to bring it back in, to rein in that feeling of normalizing that which is wrong. And speaking about this is also very, very painful now as we go through Corona. When we talk about normalizing things that shouldn't really be normalized, people have gotten used to not coming to shul. And many Rabbanim I've spoken to are worried that, if people have managed 6 months without shul, maybe they'll never come back. They're like, I thought shul was so integral to me. I thought that every Shabbos I had to go to shul and I couldn't manage without going to shul every Shabbos. Well, look, I managed for 6 months. Can't be that bad. It was fine, actually. I had a great time. Why would I decide to go back to shul? People might stop paying their shul fees. Right now it's hard to pay them. To get back into a rhythm, to find the money, even when you do have it, might be harder because now you got used to not paying something. You don't get used to not doing things. I think for kids it'll be very hard going back to school. They even said for many people who are coming out of lockdown, just getting out of the house and being able to meet up with other people was traumatic for them. One lady I listened to on the radio this week said that it took her 20 minutes to get out of her car because she was so worried, because for 10 weeks she had isolated. So now, even though now it was safe for her to come out, she was still worried. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. What happens if this is not the right decision? How do I get back into normal? And that is what the Torah is telling us. Many times you will be faced with certain things that are abnormal. But you have to make sure and you have to be certain that those abnormalities never become the standard. That they stay abnormal, that they stay something that you don't normally want to do. And therefore the Torah says, Yazir atzma min hayayin. Keep away from wine. Do something concrete that will put you back in perspective, that will recalibrate you, and that you recalculate where you really stand. And now, more than ever, is a time also to be recalculating those things. Figuring out, where do I stand on certain things? Are there things that I thought that I couldn't manage without? Maybe you learned now that you could manage without. Maybe you can manage without a cleaner. Maybe you can manage without going out with your friends all the time and spending more time at home. Maybe you don't have to work 15 hours in your office. That's the good recalculating. But sometimes you recalculate and get rid of some of the good things in your life. And you have to ensure that you don't get rid of the good things in your life, throwing them out with some of the bad things and the bad habits that you've been able to shed now due to Corona. So figure out what it is that you want to keep. Figure out what it is that's important to you. And make that stick with you no matter what. Wishing you all a very good Shabbos. Thank you.